Hi, Leilah. Great to meet you.
Good afternoon, Fiona. Thank you for the invite. This is going to be an exciting conversation.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So let's kick straight off. So, do you want to just tell me how you first got into marketing and what drew you to marketing as a profession?
Absolutely. So I think it's a bit of a combination. I grew up in a multicultural environment, multilingual, and I always understood there was a difference in humans and human behavior and motivations from those perspectives. And then I think it was a combination when I turned 16, I really wanted to earn my own money. So I got a job with Boots, and it was the ultimate. I was like working with all these amazing brands that they were distributing and selling, and just seeing consumers purchase at the rate at which consumers were purchasing products, and how convincing these brands were at selling their products and Boots at getting the footfall into their stores. And also just understanding that people were buying things that they didn't need to be buying. I mean, I, for one, age 16, buying anti-cellulite cream,
Crazy.
like didn't need that, but somehow there was something really attractive about the way that brands were selling themselves. And I think that was the early exposure of, product, price, place, promotion, and the
Yeah.
impact that this can have on human behavior and consumer motivations. And so that sort of, along with learning a bit about psychology, pushed me towards going to university and learning about marketing and really not consolidating, but getting that academic exposure to what the discipline is and how it functions, learning these amazing pieces of research, and academia, empirical research that had been conducted way before my time that created the foundation stones of marketing. And so that's sort of how I got into it. And having learned that at university, for example, I remember doing a dissertation on GHD and how phenomenal their marketing approach is, and was back then, and pioneering it was. And that just made me go, wow, I want to work in this. I want to be doing this as a job. And for the past 17 plus years, this is what I've been doing internationally, helping brands grow.
Fantastic. Yeah, that psychology piece is so important, isn't it?
Understanding the consumer, making
Yeah.
sure that's at the heart of everything that you do so that your product or your service is right for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your career look like so far? Are there any sort of roles or experiences that have shaped you as a marketer, would you say?
Yes, I think it was pretty early on for me. So there's been a few twists and turns along the way. I started out working for a luxury premium online flash sales e-commerce company called Vente Privée in Paris. So instead of going down to London, I headed across to Paris, being a dual national and a fluent French speaker. And I started my career there, and it was phenomenal. It was exhilarating. It was at a time when e-coms was booming. They were one of the leaders across Europe for what they were doing. And it was exposure from a sort of like an in-house creative agency perspective, brand campaign management, tied in with this commercial element of e-commerce. And it was the exposure of like how great marketing can really, push sales, and can create that desire and create that demand, to harvest it through purchases. So that was the first experience. And then romance took me to Tel Aviv, where I went and worked there. And I was determined not to let a change in location and completely new country to me change my career trajectory.
Right.
So at that point, I mean, because at Vente Privée I was managing teams of 10 plus, cross-functional, multidisciplined individuals to get these sales to fruition with all of the advertising campaigns that went with it. And so I was hired by a luxury travel company that was startup essentially, to lead on their marketing, to help them with all of their B2B and B2C, but equally, to help run the company. So be the second in command to the founder and the managing director of the company,
Wow.
recognizing that I was skilled at managing multidisciplined teams, to the benefit of leading to, sales and growth. And that was a pivotal moment because in smaller companies, founder led, budgets aren't as glorious, and teams aren't as fat, and you really have to do a lot with a little, and growth is key to survival. And so in that instance, that was sort of the epiphany, eureka moment of, you can do marketing, but if it isn't driving sales and if you can't tie it back to sales, what are you doing? Why are you here? And so from that moment on, my ethos and my approach to marketing, across all of the academic learnings that I'd had and the experience, was to tie things back to commercial output. So even at that point, which was, over 10 years ago, it was about looking at data, sharing the data and the insights, the power of integrating teams together to the benefit of the business, sharing those insights so that we could all read off of the same page and work towards the same objective, get the quick wins under our belts because we were working as a team. We were finessing, delivering that consumer promise. So that's where I understood that as well, of the power of working together. Because marketing is powerful, but it is only it's only as good as it is at communicating with all of the other functions to deliver that consumer promise. Because marketing doesn't do all of it. All of the other functions contribute to that. And so from that moment forwards, over the last 10 years since I've been back in London, leading marketing functions, transforming them, growing them from the ground up, it has always been with an eye on data. And that's been sort of the transformative moment for me, to helping businesses understand how to bring data to the heart of their business, to inform decisions and to guide decisions to grow.
That's what boards want, isn't it? That's what board meetings are all about, is data, and can you prove what you're doing? It's you're taking out the individual's views on how successful that marketing is, and actually it's just down to the data. You're proving that it's a success.
Exactly. And it's a language everybody understands, right? So marketing can be seen sometimes as a dark art. I'm not a favour of that, and that's why I lean heavily on the data, because it's the language that most will understand at different levels. And so you can have different levels of data for different audiences to demonstrate the same message and to get everybody on the same page and rowing in the same direction. And that often builds trust and confidence as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is lacking in some marketing departments, the just going back to the data and talking in the language of the financial controller, for example, or the MD.
Exactly that. And, people, I think the moment that marketing has a great relationship with finance is the moment of success, right? Because it's different ends of the spectrum and different approaches in terms of the discipline. And so if they can understand each other's viewpoint, then they can work symbiotically to the benefit of the business. And that trust and confidence has to be there between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So just sort of going back to that, looking back at your career, is there anything you'd do differently if you were starting over now?
I think probably what I would do is have taken more time to reflect, right? So to take that time to look at the value that I've been bringing, the bits that I enjoy, and piecing those together to sell that moving forwards. And certainly this year, that's what I've been doing, to have that introspection, to be able to do that. And I think that's what I encourage people along the way, because we can get really wrapped up in going from one job to another, but without sometimes enough thought about whether that's the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah, just to put yourself maybe as a higher priority and what you want as well.
Yeah, and then I think it helps you be attractive in the marketplace because it's genuine. It is, you're motivated by that, and then you're a more compelling proposition in market.
Yeah, I agree. So it's sort of on that same theme, what advice would you give to somebody who was just starting out in their marketing career today?
I love this question because I think it's challenging for marketing at the speed at which we go, but there are several things for me that spring to mind. So commerciality. So I rinse and repeat this all the time. Anybody in a business needs to understand how the business makes money and which levers affect profitability. And if you do that, you can then better understand your individual role in your individual contribution, your contribution as a team, and how you go to achieving the profitability and the sales and the revenue of your business, instead of going in blind, right? So that's absolutely important. You're better able to develop your own KPIs with meaning once you've understood that. I think the other thing is qualifications. I see it time and time again, or I hear it time and time again of individuals or people that don't have the grounding in a qualification in marketing. And you can see the difference, right? So I encourage people to get a qualification. I did a degree, but I'm not saying that this is the be all and end all. There seem to be new ways of learning about marketing. For example, you can balance it with academia and work placements at the same time. It depends how you learn, but I do think there's great value in that, being able to sort of learn the practice and then go into the workplace whilst you're learning to apply it, so that you can get a real understanding of how that works in practice.
Yeah.
Ideally. And that will help you once you do get into a role as well, right? Because you've got the foundation stones of the principles of marketing that often haven't changed in decades and still ring true and still remain true, whilst you're listening into the industry over a period of 2, 3, 4 years, understanding how marketing is evolving because of digital impacts, AI impacts and things like that. So I think it's quite complementary. And I think I would also say, don't specialise too early on. I do still think there is great value in getting a broad understanding as to, how marketing works. Then later on, you've got time to specialise, but it means you're not pigeonholing yourself too early on. You're also less vulnerable to, trends coming in and then leaving within marketing. And that I think is a great approach. Last one, I think really important is be cross-functionally curious. So when you're in a business, go talk to your counterparts in different functions, understand how they affect the business, understand how they may interface with you or how they could interface better with you. Again, for that more integrated approach.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can be too nosy, shall we say, with different departments, and that curiosity is going to really help you develop as a rounded marketer. I 100% agree with that. I think, there is a tendency to sort of feel like you should stay in your lane, but actually marketing is a cross-function platform, function, and you do need to know how other departments are operating.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
When you're looking at the path to purchase, right, customer journey, and we talk about this all the time, just how somebody goes from completely unaware about you to parting with their money and buying you. There's a lot that goes on.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day, do I think consumers are aware of that? I'm not convinced we are. We know that we consider stuff sometimes and sometimes we don't, but I'm not sure we're aware of it in the way that marketing is. But there are a lot of things that happen along that journey that aren't just dependent on marketing. If you're using social media as a customer service management platform, there are things that happen there that if you're not aware of them, you don't know what could be happening to your prospective audience, right? So having a hand on that and hearing those insights is really, really valuable.
Yeah, agree. That's really helpful, thank you. And I agree about not pigeonholing yourself too early on. If you can specialise in something, actually, I think you need that generalist marketer base. You might find that you're specialising in something that actually becomes almost obsolete. The way things are changing, the way marketing is moving on, you don't want to kind of push yourself down a path and then not actually be able to back out.
Yeah. And I think we've seen a lot has been shaped in marketing by regulation as well. So things go in and out of vogue, but regulation has also affected the way that we do marketing. So it can help you be a bit more flexible to, your next role or how you progress.
Yeah, give yourself a bit of longevity, I think. Yeah. Okay, so when we were chatting before, we were talking about diagnosing and aligning marketing functions in new organisations. And I know you've got sort of strong opinions on that. So, what's your process for quickly identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities in a marketing setup for a company? If you were just going in there tomorrow, how would you approach that?
Wow, big question. One I love. So, as I mentioned earlier, I've spent, I think, my past 10 years doing exactly that, going into businesses that have got a challenge, either because they need a new route to market. So basically diversifying the way they sell their product, selling it in a new market or through a new route. And so going in there and sort of appraising anything that exists or building it from the ground up has been my specialty for 10, 15 years. And I love that because it gives you an opportunity to do things, dare I say it, the right way. You can go in, and I think the best approach to take is to put data at the heart of it, because as we were saying, that's the common language between all of your stakeholders, right? So you really have a common grounding there. That helps you to look at what was, right? So it helps you to understand how the business got to where it is today, what succeeded, what didn't, and it gives you a feeling to point you in the right direction moving forwards. It also helps you to plan moving forwards, right? So to be able to set accurate KPIs with the team to build you for success. Looking at customer insight is of absolute importance, right? I've worked in a business before where the feedback internally was one thing, and then we conducted some consumer insight, and the feedback was very different. And that informed the marketing strategy, right? Because we were outside in rather than inside out. And what I mean by that is, and you understand this perfectly, being guided and led by your consumer. It's a no-brainer. They are the people buying your products. And if you allow internal conversations to direct the future of the business, that's where you can be in great trouble, right? Because you're wasting time, you're wasting resource, and it's not going to stick or land.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, stakeholders are really important as a marketing leader, right? So your function doesn't operate in isolation, and you need to be working together to succeed. So having that time to sit down and talk with all of the other stakeholders and their teams to get a feedback as to how things have been working, how they see the marketing function, how they would like to, improve working together, or what's been going well. And that helps to get that context and the lay of the land. Then I would say it's about running an audit, right? So looking at target consumers, what does that look like? The competitive landscape. Far too many businesses are just blinkered. They don't look at who they're competing with and why and how. So that's absolutely important. And it's important to share that out across the business, right? To say,
Yeah.
we're not operating in a vacuum. People have choices. And in times like these, they have so many choices that they may not have considered before because of the economic crunch, right?
Well, and sometimes the competitors aren't the natural competitors. They might be outside of this competitive landscape that you think it is. So it's actually really important to kind of have an open mind and look outside of that narrow set of competitors that you directly compete with, because there might be all other manner of process or different solutions out there that are meeting the needs of your consumers.
Absolutely. We once had that in travel where we were saying, travel can be a really expensive purchase item, right? Especially in this country where many of us crave the sunshine, especially in January, and so are willing to put quite a bit of money into it. But sometimes that money and that pot needs to go into home improvements, or it needs to go into a new car, and they're similar sort of ticket items. And so we tend to think of it just as our direct competition. But sometimes, to your point, that purse string is a bit more sensitive and needs to be considered across different sectors as well. So I think being aware of that is helpful to guide your understanding of the playing field and the competitive landscape for sure. I would say as well, I was talking about data earlier. It's a passion point of mine, as you can tell. One thing I see with that is data hygiene, right? So it doesn't matter how big the company is, being able to trust your data sources I cannot I cannot emphasize that enough. Um, Say you've got data infrastructures and data systems and reporting and BI, if that foundation stone isn't rock solid, then it's absolutely pointless. So really being able to appraise that and looking at the hygiene of it and the infrastructure so that it's not the house that Jack built, right? You're not building it on shaky foundations, and everything that comes after that. So KPIs and measurements are all solidly built. And then I think talking about team structure, once you've sort of got that landscape of understanding, then you can really look into the people, the tools, the technology, because then you've got a good understanding of like where you are and where you want to be, what your strategy needs to look like, and then you're talking capabilities. So you're saying, do I have the right people? And you've had a bit of time to get to know who those people need to be and the skill sets that they need to have, your agency resources, things like that, to bring them all together and integrate them. So being able to integrate your team with the right skill sets, with the respective functions, with the respective agencies is so important so that you've got that alignment and prioritization. I talk about that a lot in businesses.
Yeah.
Having KPIs and objectives is great, but if each function isn't aligned on what the priorities are, you're all just trying to achieve something that doesn't ultimately achieve the end business goal. So that's the integration element is so important too, and making sure that people are working together when I'm auditing a business and going in and looking to achieve the business objective is so important.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And also, that piece I think you mentioned about agency integration with staff, I think that's really important to get that balance just right, because you might think you need to hire, but actually it might be better to get a set of point agencies who are specialists in their fields to support your smaller team. You might not need those skills in-house. It might be better, more effective to just bring in the resource as you need it from an agency. And I think, we're quite quick to rush into hiring and building a team, but actually it might be more effective to just use outsourced providers for some of those functions.
Absolutely. And I've had that in a couple of examples where I've had the existing team and I've really done the due diligence and time to get to know those people, to understand their strengths, their challenges, and then the same with the agency. And often if the strategy is not right, if the marketing strategy to deliver the business strategy isn't right, then it's pointless doing that work because the foundation stone hasn't been right, to take all of these people in the right direction. So you've got to do all of that work first. And like you say, not be in a rush. You're going to do things well.
And do you think that would, that sort of allocation of resources, do you apply that same strategy when you're budgeting? So when you're setting the budget, obviously you're looking at what you're trying to achieve as a business, but also would you allocate that budget in a way that you've got your non-negotiables, so you've got your data platform, your integration platforms, and then whatever's left is going to be used on tactics? If you need those platforms in place to start with, are they the number one spend really?
Not necessarily. I think often when I'm coming into a new business, it's about looking at fit for purpose, right? Because often those big spends can be a misfit. You've got to look at who you are as a business and get the right fit, right? It's pointless using the number one in CRM systems if your business doesn't have the maturity to be able to exploit them. I've had it before and I've had it sit on my budget and quickly made that decision to say, we need to change that because it's sinking money that we just can't use because we don't have the right skill set. So we'll work towards that. But right here, right now, here's a cost saving that we can make because we're not exploiting it for what it should be. So I would say it's about getting the right fit so that you're paying the right amount of money so that you can free up money from the tactical side of things to be deployed effectively.
Yeah, just thinking sort of specifically about CRM, there's no point in having an enterprise sales force in a 5-person business that doesn't have the skills or data to use that. You're absolutely right.
This is it. And often I think, decisions can be made and you have to just say what's right for the business, right?
Mm,
This isn't
mm,
about people, yeah, with the best will in the world, if you had somebody that could code and do SQL within a marketing department, but if there's only three people, that's never going to happen. So
yeah.
work with the possible, not with the utopic sort of lens, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And so just sort of going back to that piece about growth and performance marketing. So, how personally would you balance the need for, the immediate growth and the results with the long-term brand building? I think it's a really important. I've asked everybody this, like, how do you balance brand with performance marketing?
Well, I've got a really specific lens, right? Being what I'll term is a growth marketer, right? Being in highly dynamic, highly competitive environments where often the levels of maturity of understanding of marketing are quite low.
Mm,
And so being able to have those conversations about, let's say, driving and creating demand, which is often called, brand, is something that nobody wants to talk about. So for me, it's about looking about efficiencies and effectivenesses. I once spent the first year of my career in a place with a static marketing budget. I was told I needed to deliver 10% growth year on year on a static marketing budget when all of the costs were going up. We succeeded. I say we because it's me
mm,
with the team delivering that. And it was about looking at efficiencies and effectiveness. It was about bringing data to the heart of things to be able to measure, test, and learn. So to be able to have that clear identification of what's working, what's not. If
mm.
it's working, keep going with it. If it's not working, pull it. When I say not working, obviously give it time.
Yeah,
And then looking at being able to build out test and learn budgets that you can continue chipping away at, harvesting that demand, which is often, performance marketing, direct response, all of that side of things. So it's about the quick wins of like looking at what you've got. Clearly, something's been going well because the
yeah,
business has been doing something, and continuing to do that, whilst in the background, trying to work and build trust and confidence in the longer term marketing, which is the demand creation, right? So getting somebody to want you, which if they've never heard of you, you're going to have to go through several different ways of explaining, hey, I exist. Hey, you should be interested. This is what we've got to offer. This is why you should want to buy us.
yeah,
And that takes time, right? You don't just buy something new out of, oh, maybe this is good for me.
yeah,
It's a more, you can have more considered purchases. And obviously, it depends which sector you work in. But the longer the consideration, the longer you need to lay all those tracks down. And that takes explaining, right? Because as we were talking about earlier, as a consumer, you're not necessarily aware of everything that goes on behind the scenes in order to get you to part with your cash to make a purchase. So for me, that longer term creating demand is related to education. So identifying people in the business that are on board, that get it, identifying people in the business that don't, that need to maybe have some empirical research presented, they need workshops delivering so that they can put themselves in the shoes of the consumer without
yeah,
thinking that their way is the way that things should be done, to demonstrate that and bring that to life so they can then apply it to the product or service that you're selling to then free up that budget to say, right, we know that we need to do this. The statistics in B2B have been pretty clear, right? That only 5% of your audience are ever in market at one time,
yeah,
95% are not. It's not as clear cut with B2C, but we are aware that there are similar ratios, right? So you need to be splitting budget between creating that demand versus your competition,
yeah.
right? And then harvesting it in market. So that is the way that I approach it, running those educationals to try and get people on the same page. Because once you've built trust and confidence with your stakeholders, you're more likely to get greater freedoms from a budgetary perspective to do some of the demand creation side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just touched on some of the things that you would do to build that trust with the stakeholders. Have you got any other sort of strategies that you would employ to get leadership on board with the marketing team's value, but also to kind of agree to the metrics?
I think that's what I touched on was the education generally. So sharing empirical research, sharing case studies in market that can help demonstrate it, sharing thought leadership pieces, and not just, the dross that happens on LinkedIn sometimes, but the people who have got credible, experience behind them that can demonstrate this to the people around you. It's suiting the right message to the right audience, right?
Yeah.
Running the workshops. But I think the other thing in terms of credibility and legitimacy is when you're within your own team. So equipping your team by sharing thought leadership pieces, insights, research, and things like that that can help them better understand the context of their role and how they influence the growth of a business. That when they are having their conversations, because these do happen, right, with other people in the business, they provide a very robust picture of what marketing does, what it delivers, and what it doesn't do, and what it's responsible for. That also helps to build trust and confidence within the business.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Side chats happen all the time. Meetings happen between, product and marketing
Yeah,
that we're not part of. So yeah, I think that's really important that everybody is in the team is saying the same, giving the same message, if you like, and the same level of confidence. Yeah,
that's it.
yeah. So I know, and I've had this before. Businesses look at kind of vanity metrics sometimes. Number of website visits, number of followers you've got on social. Now, how do you move clients or businesses away from looking at metrics like that to the real data?
Yeah. Um, I think I've had that quite easy in a way because I've in growth environments, people laugh at those metrics, right? Because they quickly understand that you can't look at those in isolation. And so having those conversations has been quite frank and transparent because of building the data flows, right? So building the reporting, building out the path to purchase and the funnel in data dashboards to be able to show the impact across the board. And so I had a really interesting conversation many years ago with the business leader. We were talking about KPIs year on year. And they were saying to me, okay, you need to deliver another 10% of web visitors. That should be one of your KPIs. I was like, really? Why? He said, well, that'll help us deliver growth. And I was like, right. And it's the age-old conversation of quality versus quantity, right? So I left it at that. And I went and did some digging with my team into the dashboards and into the metrics. And I could see that something like 20% of our website traffic on the previous year, because we'd had a massive spike in web traffic visitors year on year. And so the assumption was it should continue to snowball that way. So we'd partnered with a source of traffic that was known broadly in the industry to deliver really bad quality. So really high bounce rates. So a high bounce rate is a measurement of people coming to your website, not being interested and leaving, right, for the most part. And so having identified that was 20% of the source of traffic, that we weren't partnering with that partner again this year, it enabled me to have that conversation about quality and quantity with my business lead, to be able to say, right, look, this isn't the logic that we need to apply, right? We need to drive quality. And if you look at the funnel, so I did some very primitive demonstrations of funnel metrics and said, if you look at how it affected your conversion rate to sale, your conversion rate to sale has improved the prior year. It was better the prior year than the year where your web traffic went up.
Yeah.
Because that web traffic wasn't contributing to a positive impact on tangible sales. And that helped the conversation because it was a eureka moment of, right, yeah, I get it. Now let's work on metrics that are going to deliver that. And I always say data is great. It is not a silver bullet. It is a guide. It is a tool to help you make more informed decisions, but it is not your secret sauce, right?
It's not your,
It's a really robust guide, but you have to have and you know, we might talk about this later, but the level of education within a marketing team with regards to data needs to be up here for me, especially in
Yeah.
growth environments, because if you're not able to discern these holes within your data, you're basing your decisions on poor insights.
Yeah.
And so it's context. So it's up to the marketing team to be able to look at the data and say, I know why this happened, or I know why this is happening, and therefore we need to give this a wide berth, or we need to rethink how we're measuring our KPI, how we're, you know, delivering KPIs and defining KPIs.
I think we will touch on this later because it is very much along the same sort of story as AI being your co-pilot. If you can't spot the inaccuracies or the discrepancies in what you're being served through Gen AI, then it's
Right.
useless. And it's the same thing, isn't it? Whatever data you're presented with,
Yeah,
you need to be critical and objectively looking at that to see what that's telling you. It
yeah,
means nothing without the insights and without that critical eye.
exactly that. I once
Yeah.
was in a scenario where data was separate from marketing, and we had some really interesting moments because we understood that there were skill sets on both sides of the aisle, but actually the business meaning and insights could only be derived from working together. And that
Yeah.
was a eureka moment because I'd always had people in my teams that were doing both. So it was sort of like you have to work together to provide that context. And it's the same with sort of marketing mix modeling, right? It's having the, let's call it the binary like metrics of like funding, investment,
Mm,
um, in your marketing plan. And then it's also the macroeconomic factors that can
mm.
influence the success and the outcome of those. And that's, you know, another passion point of mine, being able to build out those models so that you can say, hey, we were, you know, expecting X and Y, but in this month something happened that completely blew our sector out of the water, and we need to track that and trace that so that when we come to look at these results next year, we have the context to understand what we should be targeting towards.
Yeah.
And if you know, hands change within functions, you have to be able to document that in one place for the good of the business, so that you know where you stand and you know how to explain the, you know, the numbers that happened.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. That is so true. And I know you've talked a lot about sort of interdepartmental working, but have you got any sort of specific advice for ensuring that departments, marketing, sales, customer service, all those customer facing units, how do they work more cohesively together
Yeah,
to actually improve things for customers?
yeah. I think you've got to know each function. Just thinking about this, you've the key to my success in the past has been building relationships with people, right? So showing willing, getting to know people, getting to know how they do that, what job they do, and how they do it, because that gives you the context to understand the opportunities, the threats in delivering that promise to the consumer, right? Which should output as a sale. So that's really important. And I think building a culture of exchange is really, really important. So encouraging people to work together, breaking down boundaries. And what I mean by that is, you know, the classics of relationship building, going with positive intent so that you can exchange with somebody, so that you can give and you can get in equal measure that's fruitful and productive to you doing your job. Um, and then I think another point that's really pertinent is swim lanes. So being able to define who does what and removing the blurriness of that, right? Because you don't want
Mm,
to be in a situation, especially in a growth environment, where you've got three people doing the same thing and fighting to do it, right? At worst case,
yeah.
you want to be able to say everybody's got their skill set. I'm doing this. This is what I'm responsible for. This is what I'm accountable for. Yes, you absolutely need to be consulted in the process. Yes, you need to be informed in the process, but this is how we're operating so that you can be nimble, so you can be agile, but ultimately super effective and efficient in delivering.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any sort of examples of where that's you've struggled to do that, or where there's been resistance?
Um, I think whenever you're in a new, when I say new business, so like a new initiative or a
Yeah.
new business, it can sometimes be grey just because maybe marketing hasn't been there from the outset. So often in new business, founder-led businesses, marketing might not come in until later, until a certain round of funding. And so somebody else has been doing it or chaperoning it, and they've taken great pride in it, and that's fantastic. But
Mm.
and then there has to be that acknowledgement that the specialist has come in, and then you work together to define those remits, and that comes into that model of making sure that people are consulted with or informed so that you can get the best out of both situations so that you can work towards delivering.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think you're right. There can be some reluctance to change, even though everybody knows change is required, because otherwise, why bring marketing into the equation?
Yeah.
Um,
But then it sort of goes full circle, doesn't it, in terms of education, right? Because you might know that you need a marketer. Um, know is a very broad brush word
yeah,
in that instance. But it's up to the marketer then to work on that education piece, and not in a patronizing way, but in a way that helps both all parties get the best out of the skill sets that are present.
yeah, yeah. Always back to that education and open transparency, I think.
And that also
Um,
comes from like maybe sometimes they're having like people in marketing that haven't been classically educated or trained at times, and then there's a misunderstanding sometimes as to what is the role of marketing, what isn't the role of marketing, and how can it succeed. And so it's sort of just setting back to the same baseline so that everybody understands the same thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Without the strategic training in place, the marketer might struggle to explain why they're doing things a certain way or what the value of this is and why it has to be done in this way.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah. Which takes us back to that sort of advice for younger marketers about training.
Yes.
Mm,
So I think so the ultimate advice for marketers about training is I was going to say it's that balance between practical and educational application. And I was saying earlier, it depends on how you learn, but I do think marketing, because of the speed at which it evolves, is very much about application, right?
mm,
It lives and it breathes. Human behavior lives, breathes, evolves, culture changes. So you do need that application if you're going to go into marketing. So I would encourage that. I mean, my degree had a year placement, and I always joke, but I probably learned more in 1 year in placement than I did in 3 years in, academia,
yeah,
because of the fact that it all came to life, and that's how I learned, right? Things
yeah,
being brought to life. So I think that's really, really important. And I think the understanding that education doesn't stop when you've got your first qualification, it continues. And that doesn't have to be more and more and more qualifications, but you do have to keep reading. You do have
yeah.
to keep abreast of what's going on, the changes that are being made that can better help you do your job.
Yeah, I think being lifelong learners is a
That's
good
it.
practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so I'm just going to take you back to the kind of less mature businesses. How would you approach? We have touched on this, but how would you approach setting up the MarTech stack for, let's say, a less mature business?
It's that fit for purpose again. So it's looking at who are we and what are we trying to achieve, and looking at a short, mid, and long term, so that you are not making a decision for the immediacy, but you're making a decision with flex along the way that allows you to evolve as your business evolves. I think you need a contingency plan in that side of things,
Yeah,
in that respect. Ensuring that you've got the right level of skill sets and capabilities in your team in order to support the MarTech, because it's pointless buying something if nobody knows how to use it, or you've not got a plan of how to get people to know how to use it.
yeah,
And I think that it's about looking at, again, looking at the data and looking at what can help you to get to a better output using technology, right? to help you to deliver the business objectives and the commercial objectives, and being, fit for purpose.
Yeah, yeah, fit for purpose now with an eye on the future. I think that's, very sensible. And just sort of thinking about being agile, being flexible. Have you got any examples where you've pivoted a marketing strategy to align with changes, maybe those big macroeconomic changes, or a business has changed its goals and you've had to kind of pivot the marketing strategy midway?
Absolutely. I joined a business that was predominantly it was predominantly serving B2C and within two specific countries, right? And those countries took a hit. And there was that realization moment that the business could no longer rely on its growth from those two markets for the foreseeable future. So as a business, we started to have to look at which other areas could we drive growth and quickly. So at that point, I worked with the product and commercial teams to identify B2B, because I'd experienced in that before, of how B2B can drive you, depending on the sector, can drive you quicker growth gains than going B2C when you anticipate all of the costs that it would cost you to go to market. So we would then start to say, okay, we're going to move into a new geography, but B2B. So we're going to target a new partner. We're going to try and achieve a new partner. We got one of the best partners in market, and I had to reskin the marketing function, the brand proposition, everything that every way that we were communicating to suit the partner through this white label. And quickly, really, really quickly, so that we could continue a growth curve. And it had absolute success because we worked incredibly closely so we won the partner, first of all, because we were intently listening to what were their pain points with the incumbent. How could we solve them? How our proposition could stand out as being above and beyond the incumbent, and really demonstrating that in communications and in our pricing to communicate that. We won that pitch, we won that business. And when it came to delivering it to the partner, to deliver to their end consumers, we worked incredibly closely with the teams there. So across marketing, I went out and did some workshops with the sales team at the other end, and I think some of our sales quadrupled, some of them doubled as a result of that.
Wow!
And it's all about being nimble, right? You can't sit there and say, damn it, I wish things were different. They're not. Move on. Find the solution. There's only a solution. There's no problem. And figure out, put your shoes in your new prospective audience, so your new consumer audience, and say, what will make them want to buy us? What will penetrate that market? What will get us the sale that we need to continue growing as a business? And putting a united front together between all of the functions in order to deliver that. I keep saying it, but it's true.
No, I don't think you can say it enough.
Right? If one person's doing one thing and another function's doing another, you're not having that united front to your end consumer, and the consumer sniffs it a mile away, right? It's not consistent, it's not distinctive, it's not differentiated, and so you won't make the sale. So that was super, super important in doing that. And, we even talk about it today. We're like, wow, we turn miracles in a short period of time for the pivot, but it was exhilarating. It was great fun.
Oh, it's important that you were there sort of spearheading that, because, somebody else may have said, well, we've never done it like that. We've never done that before. We can't possibly do it that way. Whereas you're so open to new ideas and to flex. That's obviously the core to success. It's the
commercial approach, right? You don't have a job unless you can make money for a business, right? Yeah. So you've got to go with it. You've got to figure out those solutions within your remit and to help others within theirs if you've got some value to bring to get to that point. And I think in that example, I've gone to market in quite a few different countries across my career, and because of my multicultural background, I've got that mindset of understanding, right, this is different. We can't approach things the same way. We respect our, let's say, mother brand, but this has to morph a little bit in order to be relevant to the people we want to buy from us now. And I love that. I love a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you love the solutions more than the problem.
You're right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right, though. It's that we will get there. We will get there.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. So I was just going to say, I can't really leave any conversation without talking about, the biggest thing to kind of hit marketing in the last decade,
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years. And that is AI, and all the new AI tools that are available on the market. So I just kind of wanted to talk to you about that really, and just find out, are you using AI tools? How do you feel about them? Have they changed the way that you're approaching your marketing strategy and execution?
What I would say is twofold. The first one is what everybody's saying. This is not original thought. It's helping us with efficiencies and effectiveness, right? It's helping us speed up the way that we do things. I think in that realm, over the past 3 months, I've seen leaps in generative AI in terms of the output that it's producing. It's better and better. It's a marked difference, right, than it was 6 months ago versus the period of 3 months prior to that. So that's really, really encouraging, and it's helping us with those efficiencies and effectivenesses. What really rouses my curiosity is in synthetic data. There's a lot of hype around it at the moment. There is one company that is making massive inroads. And I think that my take on that is, having worked in smaller growth environments quite a bit, synthetic data, if it's everything that it's cracked up to be, now it's been said that it's at 88% accuracy versus human.
I've heard this.
Then if that's true, it has the potential to democratize access to market research, to all of the things that smaller businesses tend to lack in the initial phases. My hypothesis the other day was that it would help private equity businesses to make quicker, better investments, to appraise potential acquisitions at a faster speed. I've since then seen a quote from somebody in that space that said exactly that. I was like, yes, it makes sense, right? Because if synthetic data is accurate like human data or human output, then you're able to pass fail or feasibility test ideas, right? And that means that new businesses can go through that process of iteration much faster and much more cheaply than they used to be, and democratize, because if it is a lot cheaper than the 3 to 6 to 12 months that it used to take, then you can actually afford to do it now. And it's the fundamental part of going to market, right? Being able to understand your consumer and whether your product, your service offering fits their desires. So I think that's a really exciting time in terms of what it could do. My question is if everybody gets access and it speeds things up, what does that mean?
How do you differentiate? Maybe, yeah. How will there be a sea of sameness?
Well, this is the thing, because if it's all reacting off of generative AI, then somebody will go to market, but then very quickly afterwards, somebody will do another piece of research. So will it just speed up the need for evolution? I don't know. Within your proposition, within your pricing, within your routes to market, within your segmentation, target audiences, I'm not sure. But I think it's exciting because, for exactly that point, when you used to have to fight hand over fist to get budget for a smaller company for research, now it could be a lot more accessible.
A lot more accessible, yeah, I agree. And we've both read about that famous marketer who talks a lot about market research and segmentation, who has invested in a synthetic data company. So I mean, that holds quite a bit of sway for me personally to look at the accuracy rates. So yeah, watch this space, I think, with that.
Yeah.
The interesting part will be those anomaly data points and what happens there.
Yeah.
I don't know how synthetic data would cope with the anomaly data.
Well, I've spoken to a couple of data scientists who have explored this a little bit and said to me, within their realm of expertise, it's the anomaly. So it's the 12 or 5%, depending on who you listen to, that isn't accurate. That's the set of data that you're interested in understanding. So it's all about context, right? In the application of the data within your specific case scenario, because it will vary enormously depending on your sector, depending on the buying process, depending on a lot of other factors. But I think it's interesting and exciting, and goes back to that point again of education. You just have to keep abreast of these things to understand the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually keeping abreast of what's happening is becoming ever more increasingly difficult because there's so much happening. I'm reading a lot of things and I'm struggling to stay on top. I'm bookmarking so many things here and there.
Yeah.
I am struggling with that.
That's it. And I was talking to agencies the other day about this, of how that's how agencies can support, marketing leadership in, bite-sized feeding us those summaries, the things that are most pertinent to the businesses that we work in, the ones that will affect the way that we work as good partners and good ambassadors to the brand that you're working for.
Yeah, some curated information that is just relevant for you. Yes, that's a good point, actually. And so this is a massive question, and obviously with the changes we've seen, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But how do you see marketing evolving then, in the next sort of maybe 5 to 10 years? What do you think will change from here?
I think, and just going on the things that I've read and some of the thoughts that I've had since then, that the roles that we will have in marketing will change. The fundamentals won't. It's just the bits of the work that we do versus the bits that we can lean on automation for will likely change. I don't have a crystal ball on that front, but per our previous conversation, there will be elements, I think, within market research that can help us out, within production that can help us out. And it will be an ever-evolving process. And I think depending on the sector that you work in and depending on the business maturity that you work in, depends on how the effects will play out, is what I would say.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be an increasing importance placed on human skills, as in, sometimes when you look at sort of the maker market, like the crafting market, there's a heavy emphasis on custom built or custom designed or artisan products. Do you think that will be the same for marketing content, where human made content becomes a premium?
I saw a really interesting thing the other day about this from a creative standpoint. I'm just going to rip this off somebody else, but I thought it was really poignant. The pyramid of production and original content. And the example, I think, was something like you've got Timu at the bottom, who they don't have branding per se, and it's just get as many SKUs out as possible and within a certain format, and that can all be automated. And then you've got sort of your mid-level brands, to use a similar example, like, I don't know, Marks and Spencer, somebody like that you might be able to do a certain level of automation, but it would still need a human input.
Yeah.
And then you've got right at the top, and skipping a few levels, but you've got right at the top the example of Patek Philippe, which is a really, having worked in luxury quite a lot, it is one of the most luxurious brands, and they pride themselves in that handcrafted approach. And so I think that, this pictogram, this diagram was demonstrating that, to say that those kinds of brands may still have a lot of value in human originality and creativeness. So I think that that's maybe the way that it might skew, that some brands value it more than others, depending on what their proposition is to their end consumer. Is it important to their DNA or not?
Yeah, exactly. And that pool at the bottom might just become bigger, but that sort of artisan high-end touch
Yeah,
will still be important, and there's still a place for that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
agreed. Okay, that's been brilliant. I just want to close out with one recap question, I guess, which is
Yeah.
just to say, is there a specific piece of advice, or is there any advice you'd give to marketing leaders, other marketing leaders who really want to make an impact in their organisations?
Um, I'll always say the same thing, commerciality. Um, Being able to tie back your input and your work to tangible commercials in a business. I can't see why you wouldn't want to do that and demonstrate that, no matter which business that you're in.
Yeah,
And on the track, I think I'm hearing more and more leaders being more and more aware of the need for commerciality, right? And being able to demonstrate your impact. So that would be the one thing, right? So speaking the same language as your
yeah,
counterparts.
yeah, yeah. I fully agree, and I think that's a really nice place to close out. So thanks, Leilah. That's been a really, really great conversation. I've learnt so much from you.
Oh, likewise, I have absolutely loved it. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that whoever listens to this has got some value from our exchange. And
Oh, I'm sure.
I would absolutely welcome feedback or people who want to talk about some of the points more with us. Then absolutely
Yeah,
welcome that. It's all about
absolutely. Yeah,
exchange.
reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.